And we are live. Good morning, everyone, or good evening in some places. The sun hasn't even risen yet for some of you. Really excited to be talking with y'all today. Today might be a really a bit of a shorter webinar, unless we go on a rant in regards to mobility, as we generally like to do, because this is a subject that we find really important. But to start off, we're gonna have some announcements. So this week's House Spirit Award winner, I'm really excited because this person has been doing great, marvelous work. They're a tremendous help to the community, and from what I see under my watchful eye, I think they are very much deserving of this. And so Ian Cunningham is this week's House Spirit Award winner. He's the HSA, if you wanted to abbreviate it. Originally, we were going to get you another coffee grinder because we saw that yesterday. But since you already ordered a new glass, we're going to have to reorder our gift. So stay tuned for that.
And also, Ian, when I visit you, you guys in California, I will personally grind your beans myself, manually.
Oh, God.
You see, this is the ambiguity what we're talking about, buddy. Yeah, congratulations, Ian. You're doing tremendous work, and I am really excited. I don't know if you guys saw Ian's latest Instagram post, but there's something in the making, and I'm very excited to see what that is. I think it involves a bit of dance, and yeah, can't wait to see you move.
Plot twist, it's not actually him, it's just this cat.
I'm fine with that as well.
Well, yes, Ian, thank you for all your great work. This is our small gesture to thank you. Next, we have our new official scribe. So, round of applause. John?
Yeah. Like most of you know, unfortunately, Lisa Roth, our former resident scribe, had to unsubscribe from OMU, basically because she was too busy, which is totally understandable. So we've had a couple of weeks where we haven't had a scribe, but fortunately, Lisa McNulty has said that she is willing to be the new resident scribe. So now she's going to transpose the various webinars, and she's going to write some notes. And we appreciate that a lot, Lisa. So thank you so much for doing that.
Thank you, Lisa, and I hope that you're doing well in Europe. I believe you're somewhere in Lisbon, Portugal.
She is, and she just moved into her new room. She is
super spacey.
Yeah, she's basically living a vagabond lifestyle, which she's been looking for a accommodation for. It's been like 2 weeks or something, Lisa, but or maybe more. But fortunately, she's found it now.
I'm sorry that I haven't bought the castle yet, Lisa. Otherwise, the dungeon would be open for you. Fun fact, someone gave me the neat idea to build a castle, so that's also an option for consideration. So we're either going to build one or buy one. So kind of weigh the pros and cons here.
So are we going to use the weighted Lego blocks for that?
Oh yeah. the Fuego Castle, or whatever Chris Chamberlain had, the Everblocks.
It's Flago. Let's just call it Flago.
Flagos. Ew.
Yeah, Flago, Lego. Come on.
Anyone watching the recording of this will be super confused. But essentially, either going to rent or buy, or build one, whichever one.
Oh, and Jikwe, he has to be the super at our castle.
Okay. I think in America, the word superintendent means something different, because every time I think of the word superintendent, I think of like a principal. I'm not sure if that's the same in Canada or elsewhere around the world, but
superintendent sounds better though. So let's just keep it at that.
Okay. And Lisa says Super Nintendo Chalmers. I vouch to remove Jigwe as the Silver Surfer and call him Super Nintendo from now on. It all works. Oh, and congratulations, Jigwe, on your movie, on your role. Congratulations on that. I know how hard it can be. John also knows how difficult it can be. He's been in like 1,000 shows of Mamma Mia, among other different entertainment things in Norway. So
those private, personal information there, Jonathan. How dare you reveal it?
I reveal everything.
212 shows of ABBA music. And this was about the same time when the Mamma Mia movie was released. So it was basically pop music torment for like 1 year, and spandex.
Pop music torment or pop music immersion. Yeah, it depends on how we perceive things, right, John?
212 shows, that's torment. That's like Chinese water torture, but with ABBA instead.
Oh, that's so funny to me. If you guys can find the footage of that, I would die to see it.
Don't. You've already revealed that I've been in Eurovision. Oh man.
Misha's like, what?
And you'll actually see me make a couple of mistakes because they asked me to join like the day before, but because they didn't have they were missing, yes, it's Eurovision. Yeah, it was a Eurovision show, I think in about
2008. It was King of Trolls. Go on YouTube.
You know this?
I see everything.
And if you look very closely, it's me making a couple of mistakes because I had like no notice at all, no time to prepare at all.
If you can figure out which one is John, then you get points for that. I'm not sure how many, but you get points.
Just look for the guy who's unbuttoned this shirt.
They're all wearing armor, so I don't know.
What I also want to see, Jonathan, I want to see like a timeline progression of your shirts, because I think they're like the last couple, like yes, exactly. See, come to the dark side and the unshaven chest side.
Before we get into mobility talk, I want to clarify something. One day when I was in Taiwan, I thought to myself, I should dress like John today and unbutton my shirt to my navel, and then I did. And then I never went back ever since that. I can't button my shirts back up anymore. It's either full or nothing now. I've been converted. What can I say? I've been proselytized.
Mm-mm.
And we're also kind of matching the same color now, John. So that's pretty cool.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So this is something that John and I discussed. But John, did you want to say something else?
Well, is DJ on yet? DJ, are you here?
DJ is not here. DJ is taking care of his mobility child.
I think his child is mobilizing him in many new ways. But if he joins, then we have another big announcement. But we can't make that announcement without DJ.
Yeah. Not possible.
No, I think that's pretty much it. Let's see. All right. So
we'll be answering. Yeah. Or John will be. He'll go off now. So I'll let him be.
No. One thing that I wanted to talk about today was based on a post written by Oliver Crossley in the group, and he basically explained about an experience where he met a therapist with a musculoskeletal therapist with 20 odd years of experience, and they had a discussion as to whether or not spinal flexion was a bad thing or a good thing. And like one of the first things that we need to talk about when we talk about spinal flexion, like whether or not your back is rounded or if it's in neutral, is that the first thing that we have to talk about is just because a spine looks straight does not mean that it is straight. Appearances lie. Like when you go into a Romanian deadlift or a regular deadlift, odds are that yes, your spine will look straight, but that's because you will be extending in some vertebrae and you'll be flexing in others. It's not because every single vertebrae is aligned in a neutral position. So like, let's say in a kettlebell swing, even though when you're doing it with a superficially neutral spine, there will be upwards of to 26 degrees of flexion, especially in the lower vertebrae when you're performing that move. So simply because something looks like it's neutral does not mean that it's neutral. So that's like one of the, for me, one of the best counter arguments to the people who say you should never round your spine. And I ask them why, and they usually start talking about disc herniations, and another like argument is the spinal extension cycle, that your spine can only go through like so and so many cycles of flexion to extension. But the easiest way counter arguing that is just by telling them, well, you're still in flexion. Just because your spine looks straight does not mean that it is straight. So you're trying to argue for something that you cannot do and that you yourself are not doing. So that's like thing number one. Just because it looks straight does not mean that it is straight. Another thing is that a lot of people talk about the negative effects of flexing your spine or lifting with a rounded spine, but there are very few that talk about the negative effects of lifting with a straight spine. Now, if you lift with a rounded spine, like when you do a Jefferson curl, or if you do a deadlift with a very rounded spine, there is a greater chance that you can get a disc herniation. Now, disc herniations are very normal. A huge percentage of the population have disc herniations without them actually experiencing any type of symptoms. That doesn't mean that we should try to get it, though. So in that regard, trying to avoid lifting with a flex spine in order to avoid disc herniations, that's cool. But if you lift with a perfectly neutral spine, there's a higher chance, or a bigger chance, that you'll end up with an end plate fracture. So people are saying you shouldn't get disc herniations, so that's why you should lift with a neutral spine. But when you lift with a neutral spine, then there's a higher probability that you'll end up with another type of injury. So why are we saying that one injury is better than the other? Really doesn't make a lot of sense. And I think like the most important argument here is, it's one of the things that we've talked a bit about in the House of Water group, where we talked about volume, which is, it's not only about what you're doing, it's how much you're doing it. And if you only lift with a neutral spine, yes, you will perhaps, there will be a smaller chance that you will develop disc herniations, and maybe your spine won't go through so many cycles of extension and flexion. But you're only moving in one way. And if you decrease the amount of movement options that you have, then you will also stress the same type of tissues over and over and over again. And if you guys remember, like the example last week's webinar, it doesn't matter the nature of the stress that you impose on the body. What matters is if you're able to vary that stress so that you can distribute the stress over more body parts with a different type of intensity, with a different type of velocity, with a different type of or angles of force, and not so much focus on one big bad wolf. The big bad wolf is you and how you choose to distribute or impose the stress on your body. The big bad wolf isn't the stress itself. And that's kind of like one of the reasons why I wanted to start to talk about volume. And we'll do a webinar on that later, is because that is the most important thing to consider when we're talking about injuries, is not the position that you're in. It's not whether or not your scapula is protracted or retracted or elevated or depressed. It's how much you choose to do it, and under which circumstances you do it. Are you doing it when you're fatigued because you're sticking to your program? Are you doing it are you doing it without preparing yourself for that movement? Like a lot of people, they will often say, my training is either structured or I play. Problem with structure when it comes to injuries is that you stick to a specific movement. The problem with play is that you don't prepare yourself for a lot of the movements that you want to play with. So we have to find some sort of balance there. So yeah, those are my thoughts on that. That is the summary of a comment I wrote on Oliver Crossley's post on Facebook.
It's also the summary of like 500 studies. So, John,
yeah, kinda. Jimmy, who's one of my clients, he sent or linked to an article written by a brilliant therapist. His name is Greg Lehman. You'll find it in the comment field under this post, and it is just an amazing piece of literature when it comes to flexion versus neutral spine. Because what you'll see when you look at this through this article, it's not about flexion being bad or about neutral being good. It's about the pros and cons of both of them. There will always be pros and cons. We just have to figure out which pros we need and in which situations, and which cons we should avoid in certain types of situations, or at which point in our individual timelines.
That brings us to a really good point around the work that we're doing now, which is the FRC Kinstretch work that Hunter is introducing us to. Now, I don't know how many of everyone went through that class, but it was a terrible, terrible time. Ramping tension has always been a very difficult thing for anyone, really. But we get the same kind of questions, which is how often should we program this work? How often should we do this? How do we make it more advanced if we need to, right? And this brings us back to the basics of mobility, which is, do you have the fundamental basics covered? Because it's really difficult to look for anything advanced when below that isn't, like what John was saying, prepared. Are we not prepared to do X, Y, and Z? But we don't examine that as a black and white issue. We examine that in terms of pro and con. You know, what is the risk to reward ratio here? And so when we do that, then we're more able to understand, okay, how can we discover for ourselves how to program this? And do I feel tired? Am I ready to do this? Do I want to push through this? What's the risk to reward ratio of doing so, if that's the route I decide to take? Rather than giving everyone a simple prescription of you should be doing it X amount of times per week, doing it at this intensity with this amount of weight, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And now we have DJ on, so I'm sure he can clarify other things as well. If you want.
I hope everyone's sitting in neutral spine right now as you're watching.
And just on that topic, you know, if anyone ever comes up to you with like neutral spine stuff, guys, just ask them if they can imagine a pole dancer like Anna staying in neutral spine the entire time, or doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu with the neutral spine, having sex with the neutral spine, any of those things. And just
anything in athletics or sport or life. Yeah, can I add a little bit? I know John, sorry, I just hopped in late. John probably answered it, but if we just look at it from the spine itself, how many segments it has, and we didn't evolve for it to be like a straight femur, a bone. Like, it's meant to have movement, right? And yeah, if you look at anything outside of the barbell and gym, like in nature, if you're picking up a human being, picking up a stone or an object in between your legs, tying your shoes, insert anything in the chaos of life, you're gonna bend at the spine. And even though, yeah, you might be putting more stress there, who's gonna be safer? The person whose tissues adapted to that, or the person who never had that stress imposed on their body? And, you know, you could always take it to an extreme, but there's always healthy stresses that you could change your physiology with. So, you know, it's not black or white, but it's just like training anything else. Your body will adapt. And I think the study John put up, it says, you know, even when you appear to be a straight neutral spine and you're picking something up like a deadlift, you are in some sort of flexion. You know, it's really hard not to be in it. So people who say, who fear monger, I don't know if it's a whole Stuart McGill thing, but you just can't say that.
They've said it already though, DJ, so we need to undo what's been said. Is the point we're making here.
And I'll also link to some of the studies I mentioned in regards to spinal flexion. But yeah, those are great points, DJ. It's like usually, and this is something that I talk a lot about in the workshops that I do, is that like we'll always be appealed to these kind of black and white answers, like is flexion good? So yes, flexion is good because you have to use your spine. Or is a neutral spine good? Yes, it's good because that way we can avoid disc herniations and we can allow our posterior chain to be more developed in our hammies and our glutes or whatnot. But these are really appealing, you know, thoughts, and it's you know, appealing kinds of information. But what you want to go for are the pieces of information that are not appealing, but they're annoying. That's the most important type of advice you can listen to. So like the advices or the tips that you get from your mom, when she says, "Are you sure you should be doing that every day?" That is an annoying piece of advice, which means that it's incredibly valuable for you. And if your mom says to you, or your dad says to you, or your friend, or your boyfriend, Ian, in my case, says to you, "Are you sure you should be doing the same type of workout when you've only been sleeping for 3 hours because you just had a baby, DJ?" That is a really good piece of advice because it's so annoying. To look at all these different studies, they're super interesting, but we have to find a way to make them practical for us. And the practicality should lead to some sort of change that is inherently challenging for you because you're not already doing that. And when it's something is inherently challenging because it challenges your biases or your habits, it should feel annoying.
I love that, John. Especially the things the mom says are grandma wisdom. These heuristics that have been told to us and passed down and down. They're coming from a place before these studies were done on lifting. And we got to think, why were studies done on, let's say, flexion and then tied into the barbell lifts? That's because it works so well for the efficiency of how to lift up the most weight from the ground. If you're a power lifter or an Olympic lifter, trust me, you want to lift in as neutral spine as you can because it's efficient and physics and blah, blah, blah. But that's constrained to that arbitrary sport that you're talking about it in. And that just happens to be what they're doing the studies and facilities on. And that's where we take our advice from, is from these coaches and athletes. But we forget that it's confined to this sport, which is arbitrary in a sense, inside the sport. So yeah, they extrapolate that to everyday life, which is much different. So we have to take it with a grain of salt. And like John said, we have this practical wisdom in us that's passed down. And we also have our eyeballs. We could also look at a movement and be like, "Ooh, that doesn't look like it feels nice." Like we intuitively know, and that's something to follow also.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, you can, the reason why I created an Instagram profile was because I wanted to make everything that people said was wrong, I wanted to make that look good. Like, as simple as that. I don't want to do stuff that is like commonly known as being wrong or bad and then make it look bad. I want to make it look good, because as soon as you make it look good, people are like, oh, cool, I can do that. I can allow my knees to fall in when I do a squat. Why? Because when that person does it, it looks good. I can cite all the studies in the world about why valgus, or falling in with your knees, isn't a bad thing, or that actually there are less ACL tears when you fall in with your knees. But that is not a good argument, because people will be appealed to what looks good, not what sounds good. So you just got to make it look good. And then the argument is that, oh, it looks like that looks comfortable. It doesn't look too bad. But yeah, if you're able to make it look good, it probably means that you're able to control the amount of variation in the movement. You know which consequences there will be in the movement, and you will be able to control the variables in the movement, which probably will also lead to less injuries.
Likely so.
I should try that. I try to make things look excruciatingly painful. I guess that's why I get so much shit.
But that's what we love about you, DJ. That's what we love about it. That face. That one.
Yeah, also back to the topic of like how much should you do the Kinstretch classes. In the beginning, I don't think you should really think about it that much. Like maybe twice or 3 times a week, maybe only once. In the first week, just doing it once will be more than sufficient, because you're not getting, it's not so much about getting a physiological adaptation from that work, because it is completely novel to the body, so it won't be able to work at its full capacity. It's learning the skill. So just doing it once or twice in the first couple of weeks will allow your body to understand the movements, be more efficient in the movements, to such an extent that it can push itself so far that you get a physiological adaptation. And after that, then we have to kind of look at what the limiting factors of the work you're doing are. When it comes to neurological adaptations, like learning how to juggle or learning your muscles to contract more, like what's often the case in Kinstretch classes, there is not a lot of studies on neurological adaptations. There is very little like advice around how much you should do, how many sets you should do, and how many reps you should do it, and at which intensity. And the reason for that is because the amount of variables when it comes to neurological adaptations are there's so many variables, including individual ones, that it's difficult to do studies on it, especially of the kind of nature of work in the Kinstretch classes. But one thing you can look at, which I would recommend, is to just take a step back from the work you're doing and consider the amount of individual experience you have. Now, when we look at experience, we have to look at it in 2 different ways: general experience and isolated experience. General experience is just in general, how many years have you been active? How many years have you diligently gone to the gym to work out? What kind of sports have you been doing? What's the nature of those sports? Are they physiologically demanding, or are they more personally demanding? And like the more general experience you have, the more general work you need to get more adaptation. But then there's isolated experience, which is, we've talked about it a bit in the House of Water, but to me, it's one of the most underestimated aspects when figuring out how to program. And that is looking at individual body parts. We don't like looking at individual body parts because it sounds too structured and sterile, but it is really important at the same time. if you let's use DJ as an example. DJ, let's imagine that DJ started doing bicep curls with these 8-pound dumbbells at home in his room. And he's done that for 10 years. And he didn't train his legs because his argument was, I walk on my legs, so why do I need to work them out? Now, he has a lot of general experience because he's been doing bicep curls, but if you look at the experience isolated, he has stressed his biceps more than he stressed his legs, which means that he will need to work his biceps more than his legs, and his legs less than his bicep, to get an adaptation in any of those body parts. So when you're doing a Kinstretch class, like what Hunter mentioned was an issue, is that, okay, this is just a general class. It's not a customized, individual, tailor-made class for you. So if you feel like there are certain body parts that you haven't exposed to the specific stress that you get in these classes, then it's probably a good idea to reduce the volume of some of the exercises. Let's say that you've never gone into a huge amount of external rotation while going into flexion in your hip. If you've never done that before, then you probably don't need to do that as many times as flexion, because you've done flexion a lot. And it's like, so many people, they tend to think that, oh, because this body part is weaker, I need to train that body part twice as much as the body parts that are stronger, which is just a really bad way of going at it, because you won't be able to recover from that work. The stress is too much. And just because you're stressing something more does not mean that you get a bigger adaptation. You will get to the point where there will be diminishing returns. So what you want to focus on is making sure that, okay, I want to make sure that this practice is sustainable, that I get to work consistently on it. How can I make that happen? How can I make it easier for me to do hard work? And the best way of doing that is just saying that, okay, I haven't flexed my hip a lot. This is really uncomfortable. I don't feel like I'm able to recover from it. I feel uncomfortable after the practice and before the practice and while I'm practicing. Then reduce the volume of that work and allow your body to recover from the stress that you impose on it. It's about stimulating the muscles, not destroying them. And that way, it makes it easier to progress because you don't stop.
That was money. Can I add a little bit to that? I think I answered in the question. Yeah, the Kinstretch, if we think of it as like strength training like anything else, if we take a squat, for example, there's been times where I've done a squat day once a week. That's pretty popular in the gym bro culture, or 2 times a week. But when I was training for Olympic lifting, I was doing squats every day. And there's a lot of popular 3 days a week. So not only volume depends on your program and the individual, but it also depends on the priority of that movement for you. Is that something you really want to get better at? Is that something you need for your sport? So when you're doing the Kinstretch class, right now, I would just use it for exploration. Do the class, go through the movements, see how it feels to you. See, it might be something you get really sore from, and that's probably somewhere you haven't visited or have stimulus from in that position. So maybe you think, hey, maybe that's something I want to isolate, take out of the program and work on the side. So you could take the bits and pieces, and depending on how you felt with it, and kind of create your own routine. But I will give a warning. The next week, we're going to be releasing an advanced class of Kinstretch, and that tore me up. I was literally having problems putting on my pants and my shoes for a week. That one is a whole, I'm sure Hunter will talk about it. But the more extreme it is, the less volume, obviously, and you want to back off. But yeah, it's individual. It's just like any other strength piece you're doing. Figure out what works for you and how it fits inside your own program and totality of training.
It's a good thing that everyone is asking these questions, though, because we're starting to dig deeper into figuring out the how to navigate this space. Because far too often we look for answers thinking that they're immutable, when in reality they're not always so immutable. They're always changing, and depending on the context and culture that you're in, like what DJ was saying, with those studies being only specifically defined for powerlifters or for people in the gym. So we have to be able to navigate these spaces in our own way, using intelligence and the skill developing here. The next thing that I think this segues really nicely into the next thing that we're going to talk about, which is the release of the advanced CARS work. So last week we released a video on how to do controlled articular rotations led by Hunter. This week, today we'll be sending out an email and also posting this into the website and the Facebook group about an advanced CARS routine that you can do if you want to ramp up the difficulty or simply explore range in a different way. Because although CARS are really great, we tend to think of them as limited to only one vector, aka I'm only going to move my joint in this space. But we can approach these with certain biases, using certain blocks to block different body parts from actually moving as well. Or use things like a shoulder depression bias, simple things like simply adjusting your position while doing these CARs. So DJ, do you want to talk a little bit more about this?
Yeah. So really, you could take the normal everyday CARs we were doing and take that to the max on your own, just through irradiation and, not the joint dissociation, not letting other joints move while you're focusing on one. But like John said last week, it's still a coordinated movement you have to learn. So the advanced CARs, you're kind of blocking down your body to limit those compensations, and also putting more load on it. And when I say load, I don't mean grabbing a weight. I just mean changing your orientation so gravity's pushing down on your arm now when you're raising it, let's say. So we're just, limiting the compensation, blocking your body down while we're doing it, and also creating more load with your position of your body. But I just know when you do this, the CARs, the original ones we did, can be taken to the advanced limit. I know Hunter probably wants to highlight that CARs itself, like I said about the Kinstretch, is an exploration. It's not like you did this movement right or wrong. You're really just turning your focus inward internally and saying, this is where I could reach with my arm today. That's what I could do. Let me see how far I could go. Not I did this movement right or wrong. So that you could take all the way. This one is just going to be a little more strict, and I would use it as a warm-up or training stimulus, and not so much during the morning routine, where it's a little less irradiation and contraction, and just kind of going through the exploration aspect of it.
The other thing that I want to highlight personally for the advanced CARs that we're releasing is that you don't have to do these specifically in these ways. You can take the principle of what is happening when you watch them and apply it to different cases. So if you see an option for a shoulder CAR and you feel like, oh wait, if I put the block somewhere else, then I can make a different way of doing this for my hip, so it's good to be able to follow these things very strictly with the guidelines that we've been given by Hunter, but it's also neat of an idea to consider taking what's common about all these things, aka where are you doing joint dissociation, and applying that to a different scenario based on your context. So that's it for that. DJ May has this question. As for the Kinstretch pails and rails, progressive, regressive, how would you like to she would like to ask, how does our body know what percentage we are cramping? I think she's talking about the ramping tension.
Oh, ramping.
Yeah.
Okay.
Ramping. From a smaller percentage ramping up to maximum force of contraction, is it based on when your body quivers more, or what are the commonalities of perception that we should be looking at?
Okay.
How do you know
it,
you're ramping up, basically?
Yeah, I mean, it's really, really subjective. If there's a muscle or you're in a range of motion where you haven't really trained or been before, it's going to be relatively low because you're recruiting those motor units for maybe the first time at this level in that position. So that's where the whole body irradiation comes in. That's where packing the breath, squeezing your fists, squeezing everything you can, and just doing the isometric comes into play. But it's something you'll get better at. I mean, we're really working with the nervous system. So it gets better. You're able to recruit more and produce more force over time, just like any other strength movement. But really, a thing that they don't talk about a lot, and that I think is pivotal, is the ability to control the contraction up. So not jumping from 1 to 2 to level 10, but imagining like a dial that goes from all the way, and you're controlling that dial. And also, can you control the relaxation of that muscle back down? Can you go from, this is as hard as I could squeeze right now, let me slowly relax it? And this is just exploring body control, tension and relaxation. So it's good to practice, but it's really subjective, and it'll get better and better. But if you're squeezing as hard as you can, and especially incorporating everything else in your body to squeeze as hard as you can, then that's really as hard as you can go right now. It helps if you maybe some cues, or if another person puts their hand on the limb you're trying to do and says, like, move me, or you put maybe a 2.5 pound weight or a little ankle weight on the end of your foot, and you're like, I need to do whatever I can to move that. That's some external cueing and feedback right there you can get. But yeah, just keep practicing, and it'll get better.
Yeah.
It's probably for the best to imagine that the percentages of the perceived effort is a guideline more so than it is a reflection of your actual capabilities. Your capabilities, especially in regards to like the contractions that you're creating yourself, they're very hard to gauge, and it's very hard to say that that 90% will be 90% of your max, because we don't have any metrics to help us figure out whether or not it's a true 90 or it's actually just a 75. So just thinking about it as being a guideline, and just like DJ said, which I agree, I think that is pivotal, to be able to just gradually increase the intensity and gradually decrease it, instead of thinking, oh, I have to get to 75, I have to get to 93.5, because I don't think we're that. Yeah, it's arbitrary, and I don't think that we will ever be able to be that accurate in the effort that we put into any movement. So use it as a guideline, and especially as a guideline that can allow you to bridge the gap between 0% intensity and 100% intensity.
Because this will also apply to all the other movements we do too, if you can extrapolate that far. So when we go into like the floor work session, one of the things that we want to do is to make things look good, like what John said. And to what degree do you require that kind of intensity? Does your body need for the intensity to do that? We'll have to figure out. So it's up to you as an individual. DJ, you're going to say something?
Yeah, I think this is something Hunter would probably mention too. If we're in a very awkward position for you, let's say you're in 90-90 and we're focusing on the abducting or lifting the rear back leg, which is pretty hard, and you can't even get any neural drive in that position and you can't get a squeeze, he would rather have you back off, lean to the side, modify it so you can contract and get a squeeze. Really set up your body and modify it so that you can contract that muscle and ramp it up. Even if you have to come out of the position and cheat, which there is no cheat, but we're just finding where we can give some stimulus to that. So I'm not sure if that's also what you're referring to, but if you do have trouble finding a contraction, you know, like it just feels dead, it doesn't move, come out of that as much as you need to feel like you have control of that contraction. Because then you're getting the benefit, you're getting the training.
Yeah.
But now that DJ's here, we can. I think we have another announcement to make, guys.
Yeah. So this is a super exciting one, and I'm super excited. I'm pumped about this just because of how Games of Thronesy it is, even though I've never watched that show. But essentially, since we're expanding the OMU empire, we are expanding each, well, not expanding each house, but expanding the responsibilities that we are able to disperse among the OMU members as we continue to grow. A great analogy that someone told me is that OMU is basically like a small liberal arts college. We're in our founding years, you know, and as we continue to grow, we'll need all the help that we can get. And so we're pleased to announce the first vanguards of each house. And what the vanguards will do is, well, we as headmasters agreed to certain things that should be done across the board, but every house will be doing it differently. So please expect that, for lack of a better word.
Well, I can give you guys some insight into what my Vanguard is going to do. So, like, the most important part of OMU is that it is the most inclusive movement community, or that we create the most inclusive movement community that we can create. We want to make sure that everyone, absolutely everyone who's a part of OMU, is benefiting from it, and as such, we need more people who can appeal to more people. Now, me, DJ, and Jonathan, we're only 3 individuals, and we are able to talk to certain types of people in a certain type of way. Maybe people feel like they can't or shouldn't get in touch with us if they have any concerns or any problems. We hope that they do, but maybe not everyone feels is comfortable with doing that. So what my Vanguard will be doing is to be making sure that the ones that are not necessarily as not exposing themselves as much on, let's say, Instagram or in the Slack group or on the Facebook group, that we make sure that they're benefiting from OMU and that they feel like their opinions matter, because they do, and that we just know what's going on in their lives. So that's one of the primary responsibilities or areas of responsibility that my Vanguard will have. It's just to basically just be a person to talk to.
DJ?
So yeah, well, I kind of need dry cleaning picked up sometimes, and no, but yeah. So what we've been trying to do, especially, is kind of get our finger on the pulse of how everyone's doing in our house, and ask, you know, if we get any feedback, if anyone has any concerns. But I feel like it might be biased if they're talking to the headmasters. So I think if we have, you know, someone almost like a public relations position where we could really find out how we could make things better and contribute in what people need, I think an inside man would help a lot, or a woman. We'll see.
And,
John, oh, you were froze for a second. I was checking on you.
and it's important to, I think, for the Vanguard in my house, to understand that this is something that can and will probably evolve over time. And so, to anyone who might feel as though like, oh, why wasn't I a Vanguard or anything like that? I'm not quite sure how to respond to that, but everyone's important, is what we're trying to say, and we're just trying to establish some goals that will really, really benefit the OMU community, both for those who love the content but don't participate, and for those who participate and love the content, making it as inclusive for all the varied opinions and beliefs and people that we have inside the community. Which means that as three headmasters, we are quite limited in that scope, quite limited in that capacity. And so, as much as we maintain a watchful eye over people, sometimes things do get missed. And so we'll need another set of eyes, another set of ears, another set of keyboards to keep in touch with everybody. And with that being said, I think it's time to announce who they are. So I will go first. In my house, she calls herself the Italian. I call her the Bionic Woman. She's the first Vanguard of the House of Wind. Is Serga Balestrini. I'm very proud of Serga.
Awesome. Serga will be a wonderful Vanguard matron, mistress.
Whoa.
Whoa. Don't take her there. Don't take her there.
For the House of Water, the Vanguard of the House of Water is, I haven't announced her nickname yet. I will announce it now. Her nickname is The Horizon. And the Horizon is Lisa McNulty, our wander-loving yogi.
Nice.
Wow, the Horizon. I like that.
The Horizon.
That's dope. All right, for House of Fire, I just want to give a shout out to some honorary generals in the house. Amir and Misha. They're always, always got my love. But for the official Vanguard position, we have the sultry assassin herself, Anna Dang.
That was so corny. I can't.
Every time you say Anna's name, you got to be like, Dang.
I love it. The harvest is big this year. Yes.
So congratulations to Lisa, Anna, and Serga. And if you guys have anything that you want to talk about, whether it's concerns or thoughts about OMU, and you don't feel like talking to us about it, then by all means you can talk to Serga, Anna, and Lisa, and just they'll probably talk to you irregardless if you have any concerns or if you have any thoughts whatsoever.
I know Serga's been having some conversations that have escaped my eye, so I'm watching you too, Serga. Yes, Nikki. That's a great point. Is that it's all ladies. We do have a lot of women in the group, and seeing as the headmasters are all men, I feel like it might be good to have some diversity. So,
can we change the position name to secretary?
Oh no, DJ.
DJ.
Somebody was thinking that, so I just had to say it.
Anna, I want you to stage an uprising in that house and take over.
Oh yes, please do. The dominatrix of the House of Fire.
Oh, I'd be down with that.
We could talk about that, yeah.
And the oh so ever submissive DJ. Yeah, no, it was a positive coincidence that we, because I mean, we didn't influence each other like the different headmasters as to which vanguard we wanted, but we all ended up picking women, which was a coincidence. But I think that it's a fortunate coincidence. This is something that I've been talking to Lisa about a bit, which I think will be a very important topic for us to address. Is like the different gender roles. I don't like that word. Within like the fitness industry, and also like the amount of ignorance amongst us men as to how training works for women, and that there are major differences in the way training feels, as well as how people want to explore or how they want to do it. And I think that having three female women, girl vanguards will help us a lot. And I'm looking forward personally to learn more about how the training and fitness industry is perceived from perceived for women, and how it's also experienced, like training wise, because there are certain things that I, as a heterosexual yet somehow ambiguous man, there's things that I can't understand. I will need a female perspective, and yeah, I think it's cool that we ended up with 3 women.
I think so too. I think that when we think about expanding our movement capacity, expanding our capacity for movement rather, we want to put ourselves, like what John said, we want to disperse the stress alongside the body, and being able to understand that if we only do one thing really well, such as being in neutral spine, then going out of that is going to be very extremely difficult. So to diversify our ideas about movement, we also need to consider the things that we perhaps have been overlooking, the black swans. What do we don't know that we don't know? And these are perspectives that we also may want to take into consideration. DJ, do you have any other amending thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that was a pretty cool coincidence that we all chose females for this role, and I think it's going to be a good fit. It's perfect.
We're gonna get everybody swords or maces. I'm not sure, but everyone should have a weapon as a defender. But yeah, it's been about an hour. Do we have any other thoughts?
Don't think so. Yes, David, we need a special hat for the vanguards, respective Valkyries. They'll get something special. You still just stand out from the crowd.
I'm trying to restrain myself from like giving away horses and at the castle.
Oh yeah, stay tuned, Anna. You'll be receiving something in the mail.
You said that so suggestively, DJ.
I already started doing bod mods on my horse, body modifications, in the hopes that it would look like a unicorn. It doesn't, but yeah, we'll see if we can get you a horse, Lisa.
I'm really into horseback archery, guys, so that's why I bring up the horses. So if you guys want to ever shoot some arrows off of horseback, come find me. But other than that, I think we will adjourn today. So thank you everyone for joining with us. This will also be uploaded. So if you really want to rewatch this, gain some more perspective, ask any other questions, please feel free to do so. Either one of us, the Vanguards, or anyone else in the house that you feel comfortable sharing with. Thank you. We'll talk to you next time. Thanks, guys.
All right, guys.